Nostalgia is a funny old thing. Defined as a sentimentality for the past, typically for a period or place with happy personal associations, it can occur at pretty much any time over anything. Maybe it's the smell of that traditional family meal you would all share on a Sunday evening. Possibly it's the sound of fire cracking with that feeling of the first warm evening of summer sinking in. Or maybe it's just something as simple as a song, or a movie, or even a YouTuber you would always watch as soon as you walked in the door from school. Truth is, it will mean a million different things to a million different people. But if you're anything like me, one of the times that beautiful little feeling pops up is whenever I revisit my favourite childhood TV shows. Amongst all the shows that come to mind whenever I think back to Saturday morning cereal time, there's a channel I think of more than most, and that channel is of course Nickelodeon. Now, I wasn't even born during its inception in the 70s, but I really feel like I grew up during the golden age of its shows. With Rugrats being born the same year as myself, I quite literally grew up with that show, and to this day, it still has a soft spot in my heart, with a little nostalgia revving up anytime I hear the first few notes of that legendary theme tune. But it wasn't just one or two shows they managed to strike gold with. There was always incredible characters to join on some insane adventure at any point. Obviously we had Rugrats and All Grown Up, but also Avatar, The Angry Beavers, Hey Arnold, Cat Dog, even Drake and Josh, despite that show being a little tainted in recent years. And of course, we can't forget the absolute behemoth that is SpongeBob Squarepants. I spent countless hours of my childhood with these shows, and still, to this day, I enjoy a fair few of them despite being in my 30s. But as you already know from the title alone, with this massive success Nickelodeon found with their shows releasing through the 90s and 2000s, it's only natural that a slew of games would accompany them.
The first Nickelodeon console game actually dates all the way back to 1988, when they released Double Dare,
an NES game based on a game show of the same name that premiered in the mid-80s. After this, we've seen hundreds of Nickelodeon games releasing across multiple platforms. Home consoles, handhelds, computer and flash games, and even mobile games. There was always a way to join in on a new adventure with one of your favourite on-screen characters. But today, I want to take a look at mainly the console games that were releasing at that golden age I was talking about.
Am I using this video as an excuse to buy and play a bunch of Nickelodeon games I always wanted to but never had the chance to as a kid? Well, yeah.
But I also want to see if they managed to make the games as enjoyable as the TV shows that birthed them. So sit back, relax, and join me as we take a look through a few Nickelodeon video games. Considering I started the intro to this video confessing my undying love for Rugrats, I think it's only fair that we start with the games. Not only did the show cement my love for the channel early on, but it was one of the driving forces behind Nickelodeon's success with kids' animated shows in the early 90s. See, Nickelodeon was first started in 1977, and whilst their main goal was always entertainment for kids, the first decade and a half was spent broadcasting kids' game shows, quiz shows, educational shows, and other studios' animated properties. That was until 1991, when they decided to launch the almighty Nicktoons, with its first outing being a 90-minute block airing 3 completely new and original animated shows. We got Ren and Stimpy, Doug, and of course, Rugrats. The success of these shows was the catalyst for Nickelodeon to really start investing in its original animation, spending the next few years introducing a world of kids to an array of characters we would all go on to love for the next 3 decades and counting.
And that brief history that probably should have been in the intro brings us nicely to their games.
It's pretty obvious that any successful franchise is inevitably going to get its toes dipped into the world of home console entertainment, and Nickelodeon is no stranger to doing this. The baby's first console game came in the form of Search for Reptar on the PS1, and this has to be one of the most nostalgic items in existence right now. The game puts us directly in the baby's little boots, letting us explore multiple gameplay styles with each of the game's levels being based on a different episode of the show. A really brilliant way to make a console debut if you ask me. It gives players a chance to explore these familiar environments and stories in a completely new dimension. Quite literally. Starting the game will throw us straight into a faithful recreation of the show's intro, and it's things like this that always give me so much hope for a game. Did they need to create this? No. They could have easily chucked in an FMV or even a still title screen with a little music and called it a day. but the fact that they wanted to go beyond that to give players a new way to see something they'd grown so familiar with is commendable. Yeah, I know compared to what other games were accomplishing at the time, it's not a big deal, but I still appreciate it. So after that trip down memory lane, we're into the main concept of the game. Tommy is looking for his Reptar puzzle.
Where's my Reptar puzzle?
Meaning we're going to need to find 12 puzzle pieces scattered about various levels to complete both the puzzle and the game itself. For now, we're left to explore the Pickles household in the third dimension, and it's always such a good time taking a look through locations that are so familiar, but now so new and exciting thanks to it being in a 3D space. I think it's just one of those things that will always be cool to me. Anyway, the house acts as a hub area for the different levels of the game. It's a good way to let the target audience of younger players get used to the controls without any real threat or obstacles. Those controls teetering on the edge of being frustrating at times just due to a bit of a dodgy camera getting stuck on walls, but we're not going to have to worry about that until a little later. Our first task for now is egg hunt. Running around the house to find 35 Easter eggs before Angelica steals them all for her selfish little self. We're given a pretty lenient time limit here, and with the house itself being pretty small with only the downstairs area being accessible for now, you can just frantically run from room to room without too much issue. After a minute or so, we quite easily beat Angelica by collecting all the eggs, resulting in her running off crying. But to her credit, not before she gets in an absolute banger of a roast on Tommy.
Hey baby, you missed an egg! Your head!
Next up, rather surprisingly, we're off for a few rounds of mini-golf. The level obviously being based off the episode Ice Cream Mountain, an episode that introduces the babies to the bullshit and deceit that's oh so present in the real world. In terms of gameplay here, there's really not too much to go into. It's a simple but enjoyable enough mini-golf game, needing you to pot the ball within a certain amount of hits. I know I say this in a lot of videos about a lot of games, but it's because, quite frankly, I still don't know what the hell I'm doing with these videos. But it's both pointless and incredibly boring for me to go through each level giving you a brief oversight of what we need to do. You'll be able to see from the gameplay that we can explore different environments from the show, like controlling Spike through a maze or spooky sewer, keeping cookies from Angelica in a pass the parcel style minigame, or, obviously, fuck up an entire city as Reptar. Instead, I think it'll be worth me just going through a few things I liked about the game, and a few that may have aged a little less desirably.
So we may as well start with the good. It is hard to know whether this is down to the actual game design or just a little of the old nostalgia affecting things here.
But I really love the ability to wander through the Pickles household at my own pace. Yeah, it's a glorified level select, but still, it really did a lot to sell me on the game within the first few minutes, hence why I keep bringing it up. See, I grew up with an N64, and don't get me wrong here, I love the thing. I spent a worrying amount of hours running around Peach's castle exploring everything it had to offer and practicing my sick parkour endlessly. But in terms of Rugrats offerings on the system, I personally was stuck with Scavenger Hunt. Now, I still sunk a disgusting amount of time into that game just for the characters themselves, but I actually hated the game itself. It didn't really feel like it was a Rugrats game, rather a game with the Rugrats in it. It was slow, boring, and kinda confusing for younger players, but I still played it endlessly just down to my love of the show. My point is, if 6-year-old me could enjoy that, you better believe that I would have lost my shit over being able to freely control the cast in a 3D space. And I think that's the best thing about Search for Reptar. It feels like it was made solely for fans of the franchise. The original voice cast returned to voice their cartoon counterparts. The music is taken either directly from or fits perfectly in line with that of the shows, the levels themselves being based off episodes of the show, and even the loading screens closely emulating that of the episode's intros. N-Space made sure that every aspect tied into what kids had come to love from the show, and adapted it into an admittedly really simple, but really fun little game. With all that said, we still need to remember that the game's 25 years old at this point, and all the nostalgia and fanfare in the world can't stop some good old PS1 junk. But in all fairness, there's not all that much here, and certainly nothing that will take away from the experience. As I said earlier, my biggest issue really just came down to the camera, which did regularly get stuck on walls and in slightly weird positions, but again, it's nothing that you can't easily adjust to. It's noticeable, but never reaches the point of frustration that can come from this type of camera at times. I do think it's helped a lot by the slower movement speeds and overall easier level design. There's no bottomless pits or dangerous one-hit obstacles that can cause your blood to boil whenever the camera won't do what you need it to. The only other issue really was the jumping and climbing. Again, this really never became annoying, but it did feel like there was either some input lag or some weird edge detection whenever trying to jump and climb to ledges or across gaps. But I mean, these issues are neither exclusive to this game or nothing that we haven't come to expect from a kids tie-in game from 1998. The game itself is incredibly short and easy, with me getting through it in about an hour and a half while stopping due to recording. So I think you could quite comfortably get through the game in under an hour if you really wanted to. But I think a lot of kids would have taken a lot longer than that, just taking in what the world has to offer, and replaying the different levels to spend a little more time with their favourite characters. If you grew up with the show, grab yourself a copy off of eBay, or, sin, and spend an afternoon revisiting the world of Rugrats. At this point, I was going to talk about Studio Tour, the PS1 follow-up coming just a year after Search for Reptar, and despite it being slightly larger with a few different gameplay styles, it's very much the same game. I was even a little disappointed to see that they introduced that static title screen we was talking about.
And I know I said they could have just done that for this game, but I feel like once you've set the standard by putting in the effort to go and create the full intro,
I feel like you can't then lower the standards for the follow-up. 2 out of 10. Nah, honestly, I did enjoy Studio Tour, and despite it feeling like DLC, it was fun to try out the different games, but there's nothing I could say about Studio Tour that hasn't already been said about Search for Reptar. So instead, let's jump up a generation and take a look at what Rugrats managed to achieve on the GameCube. Rugrats Royal Ransom is described as an action-adventure game, this time being handled by Avalanche Software, the studio responsible for a pretty weak Rugrats game already with Rugrats in Paris, but also known for the TAC series and one of my favourite games I've played on this channel so far, Toy Story 3. So it's fair to say I'm going into this one with some big expectations. The game came out in 2002, just 3 years after Studio Tour's release, and it's always cool to look back at games from the early 2000s and see the jump in quality between the two generations. Anyway, the game puts us back in the boots of the cast, and in a similar style to their previous ventures, gives us a bunch of different levels with a variety of gameplay styles to try out. So, does 5 times the bits equal 5 times the fun? Probably not, but let's find out anyway. The game opens to a cutscene showing us one of Stu's new crazy inventions.
The Play Palace 3000.
AKA a total disregard for any building regulations
or the vitamin D levels of an entire neighbourhood.
AKA a big ass castle in the back garden. The Rugrats can go wild with their imaginations on this one, with that being the basis for each of the levels. Obviously, in true Angelica fashion, she's claimed ownership of the castle and is holding the baby's toys hostage. So it's up to us to navigate each floor, beating levels to earn enough batteries to progress to higher floors, eventually reaching her at the top. Little bit of a side note here, but as nice as the opening cutscene is,
I really don't understand the gross border they've decided to frame everything with. Yeah, nitpick I know, but I couldn't help but mention it.
So after the cutscene, we're straight into playing, and now we can actually select whatever character we want to play as. But there's absolutely no difference in playstyle or movement between any of them though, so it just comes down completely to who you want to play as. It would have been nice to see them implement slightly different playstyles here. Maybe Chucky moves faster on the ground but is scared of heights so slows down when platforming. Or Phil is a little slower in general but has more health or something. I don't know, just anything to add a little variety and make players test out each of the characters to see whose playstyle they prefer. Inevitably, everyone would just pick Tommy, making the whole process redundant anyway, but the option would have been nice. Also, in a similar way to Search for Reptar, we're able to explore the Pickles household at our own pace again. But it just doesn't feel the same here. There's nothing to do or even see in the house, and to me at least, it really doesn't look like the same house that was in the show. Did they rearrange it? Did they move? Did they get a new living room set up in the last 4 years? It's nice that it's here, but does seem a little pointless in the grand scheme of things. So with not much to do on the ground, let's just head up the castle and into our first area or world of the game. As you'll see, each area is themed with a set amount of levels within that theme. We need to collect small batteries, using them as a sort of currency to unlock more levels. Also collecting big batteries to power up more of the castle and in turn gain access to more levels. Yeah, a little bit confusing, but I'll come back to that. What I do really like is all the different environments we get to explore throughout the game. And with the whole premise of the levels being the baby's imaginations, there's no real rules they need to confine to here, leaving us with a really good mix of unique themes to explore. We have a snow world with downhill races and snowball fights, a jungle world with monkey catching and river rafting, and an Egyptian desert Aladdin-y themed kind of world with some Assassin's Creed style rooftop running and some pretty intense third-person camel spitting sections. You get the idea. If you grew up playing 3D platformers, you're going to be used to the whole different worlds having different themes with the inclusion of lots of different modes, so to speak. Whether you're snowboarding slopes in Tak, entering hoverboard races in Ratchet & Clank, or frantically fishing in Jak and Daxter. A lot of these early 2000s games would introduce these minigame-esque sections to try and keep the kiddies engaged, but at their core, all the games I mentioned are still 3D platformers. But I struggle to assign that same tag to Royal Ransom. There's too many sections of the different styles to just call it a 3D platformer, but due to the length of time you spend with each of those styles, I wouldn't go as far as to call it a minigame collection either. It's sat in some weird middle ground, but here, I actually think it works in favour of the game. I think you always have to look back from the point of view of the target audience at the time, and I think the simple controls and moveset, paired with the hand-holding navigation of the levels and the constantly changing game modes, is enough to create a fun and engaging game without any real barrier to entry. A few times during my playthrough, my brain just slipped into autopilot mode and I just enjoyed mindlessly exploring each of the different environments. And in my opinion, that's where Royal Ransom really shines. Chilling in some of the larger platforming levels, just wandering about and seeing what you can find. Where the cracks start to show is basically everything in between those points. Now, it's nothing major, more just a combination of a few grievances and strange decisions by the devs. As we said earlier, your main objective throughout the game is to reach the top of the castle. To do this, you're going to need to earn big batteries by completing levels, but those levels require a set amount of small batteries to unlock in the first place, so you'll need to make sure you're finding enough smaller batteries in the levels you've just played to unlock more levels to unlock more of the big batteries. And if you're not careful, you can temporarily lock yourself out of progression, meaning you'll have to replay earlier levels to look for and collect the small batteries. This actually happened to me at a certain point, and despite a few frustrations, I would say all of the levels are fun enough to run through for the first time. But having to replay certain levels to search for more batteries really starts making those little grievances you have with a few of them a lot more annoying. Another really weird decision is how the different currencies work in the game. So you'll collect coins throughout the levels, and these coins are used to gain access to the castle itself, almost like lives. If you fail a level, you end up back on the ground and need to pay those 100 coins to get back into the castle. But again, this is just another point in which you can lock yourself out of actually playing the game. It's good for games to have punishments for failing or different risk and reward mechanics, but I mean, it's a fucking Rugrats game. I just think the mix of two different batteries with two different currencies could have been simplified a little bit. Outside of that, there's really nothing else I can complain about with this one. Yeah, I might be letting my love for the show cloud my opinion a little here, but who cares? Fans of the show are the real target audience here, and much like their PS1 games, I think it does enough to give those fans an enjoyable ride. Just this time with better visuals, a massive array of different themes to enjoy, some brilliant music, and for the most part, a great mix of different gameplay styles to try out.
Do I think Royal Ransom is going to end up in many top 20 GameCube game lists? Absolutely not.
But if you want to relive the glory days of your childhood with some of your favourite characters, this definitely fulfills that. I know Rugrats has had a pretty shaky history with their games, but for me, I've really enjoyed the few that I've played so far. But I'm pretty sure you're all sick of me going on about my love for the show at this point. So let's see what one of my other favourite shows growing up has managed to achieve with their games. If I had to recall my top 3 Nickelodeon shows off watch time alone, I think after Rugrats, Fairly OddParents may just take that second spot. It's just such a great concept for a show, not only from the whole what would I do with all these wishes angle, but because there's no rules they had to follow when it came to their plot devices or settings. Everything's based off the obviously insane and irrational wishes of a 10-year-old boy. As I'm sure most of you are aware, the show follows Timmy Turner and his two fairy godparents Cosmo and Wanda, fairies with the ability to grant Timmy's wishes. Naturally, each episode contains 20 or so minutes of some comedic chaos, all wrapping up with some vague life lesson at the end. It's a pretty standard structure, but it's handled really well. I think with the characters especially, they managed to make them over the top, memorable and funny, without too much of the lol so random style of humour a lot of kids shows tend to lean on. The show originally ran for 5 seasons, ending in 2006, but then continued a few years later for a further 5. And then absolutely nothing else happened with the show whatsoever. With all that said, we did of course get the inevitable tie-in games released around the peak of the show's popularity. The first one coming in the form of Breakin the Rules, released for basically everything. The game got 3 different versions, one on Game Boy Advance, a PC version, and another for consoles. We are going to stick with the GameCube version for this video, which was handled by Blitz Games, a studio already pretty well versed in licensed and tie-in games. So, booting it up, we're greeted to what is a pretty clunky and disjointed cutscene. Essentially, Timmy's parents are going away for what sounds like an orgy, to be honest.
Timmy, we're leaving for our seminar weekend.
So, of course that means the dreaded babysitter Vicky will be coming over. Timmy asks the fairies to distract her, but as per the rules, no one but Timmy can see Cosmo and Wanda, resulting in Timmy wishing there were no rules. But by granting the wish to get rid of the rules, they are actually breaking the rules. Oh yeah, that's the name of the game!
That's what the game's called.
This means the next person who touches the rulebook is granted the power of the fairies. Of course, Vicky is the next person to touch the book, so we have to go into different levels of the game, dealing with the repercussions of Vicky's wishes, whilst collecting all the pages of the rulebook, which are now, for some reason, scattered about various places. Yeah, the plot is incredibly clumsy and doesn't make sense in a lot of places, but as long as the game itself is fun to play, I'm not massively bothered about the initial setup. So after all of that, we jump into our first section of gameplay, given to us in the form of a short tutorial. It's an incredibly simple control scheme though, so not a massive amount to go through here. The main mechanic it wants to teach you about is collecting 5 wish stars to grant yourself a wish within that level. You have absolutely no control over what you wish for or when you use it though, so it's basically used as an excuse to introduce the next section of the level. For instance, our first level sees us jumping into the world of the Crimson Chin. Yeah. Vicky has wished for him to lose his powers to spite Timmy, meaning the town of Cincinnati, phenomenal name by the way, is overrun with criminals now that it's left without the protection of the Crimson Chin. Is it going to do that every time? So, we jump into the world, collect our 5 wish stars, and wish we had something to chase the fleeing criminal. This leading into a super simple but fun enough flying chase through the city. After this, we're put back into the town square to then collect another 5 wish stars before the next section. And this is where my problem with the mechanic starts to kick in. The stars are placed in the exact same areas, resulting in you collecting them just feeling like these sections were here to artificially lengthen the game.
If after each section of a level, a new path or platforming section was introduced, I really wouldn't have a problem with it.
But you literally just have to run around a flat area and chase after the 5 stars a total of 3 times, just in this level alone. I just feel like they could have done a lot more with it than they did, but we're still very early into the game, so I'm keeping an open mind. What I will say about this first area is visually, I absolutely love it. The characters themselves don't look amazing. They can actually look downright terrible, to be honest with you.
What the hell is even that?
But I mean, they're fine for what they are. But the style they chose to go with for the environments is just perfect here. An awesome monochromatic palette with pops of colour, along with the black silhouette of the cityscape in the background. Pair that with the super bold lines, and it really makes this feel like you've been plopped into a comic, whilst also still remaining faithful to the original style of the show. I especially love the little halftone textures in the trees. It just all looks really good. So the second section then has us saving the kidnapped mayor by making our way through a bakery to take out Spatula Woman. A very linear corridor level with an equally simple boss fight to end things. Unfortunately, I just feel like there's a lot of lengthening going on here too. The boss fight alone has you hiding behind boxes to avoid her attacks before throwing your boomerang at her. When she smashes her way through all of the boxes, you've done it. In the grand scheme of things, it's probably taken about 2 minutes, but it's just way too much of you doing the same thing over and over.
If she started some new attack patterns or introduced obstacles to avoid while running to the next box, this would be fine.
But unfortunately, it's just boring. The same goes for the next section too. We have to chase gilded arches over rooftops while grappling to different points. But again, it's boring. Like, there's no flow to the grappling at all. We have to enter first person mode, aim at the grapple point and press B to grapple to it. We then move across the roof to the next edge, enter first person mode, aim at the grapple point and press B to grapple to it.
I mean, it even sounds boring just saying that.
The section just isn't that fun and goes on for way too long for what it is. And shall I tell you what's less fun than going through this section the first time? Going through it all over again because your game glitched out, leaving you endlessly falling through the floor before needing to restart the entire level. We get back to and beat the boss, saving the city and reuniting his powers with the Crimson Chin. Yep, but at least that brings us to the end of this section.
Honestly, I really don't want to be grumpy about it, so I'm just hoping we're being eased in a little here, and now things will really start getting interesting.
We're put back into our room, which acts as a mini hub area to enter each of the levels, with new sections of the room opening up as you progress. Now we're told a bus has turned up to take us away to camp. Wait, why the hell did we need Vicky to come over if we were going to camp anyway? Regardless, she's taken over the camp and has all the boys held hostage. This turns into a stealth style level, making our way through the woods, avoiding the girls with their flashlights and rescuing the boys. Again, just kinda boring, and there's no mechanics added to make stealth any easier or any more engaging. You're basically left hiding behind tree stumps or just out of eyeshot of the patrolling girls, waiting for your opportunity to run through their paths. The wish we get granted in this level is the ability to chop down trees to make paths over rivers. Yay. Yeah, I'm repeating myself yet again, but it really does feel like the only reason this is here is to slow you down and add a little bit of time onto the level. We wrap this one up with a rhythm game because it's 2003, so of course there's a rhythm game. Next up, we're jumping into the Vicky Virus, a level in a video game based within a video game.
Meta.
I'll be honest, I didn't actually mind this one as much. They did a great job visually with the whole Tron-esque I'm in a video game aesthetic, with even your health and the save screens being changed to match the theme. It does start off kinda slow with us needing to push blocks of ice to make bridges, before getting into some more interesting bee shooting and hovercraft racing. Also, this incredibly annoying run up some stairs avoiding balls of data.
Yeah, honestly, the less questions you have at this point, the better.
After we make our way through the level, we're introduced to another boss fight. But again, it leaves us standing in place, avoiding a very slow moving obstacle, waiting for our opportunity to get a hit in. I feel like I'm just kinda going through the motions while writing this, making the same point over and over. But honestly, that's basically what it feels like to go through the game. Yeah, you get some nice themes and I really like a lot of the visuals, but ultimately, I don't think the game has much to offer past that. Maybe it really picks up further into the game, but after the 2 hours I've played, I don't really care to find out.
I actually have a little confession that might not be entirely fair to break into rules, and that is,
I actually played the follow-up before playing this one, and it's basically an improvement in every way. So going back to this one after might make the issues I have with it seem worse than they would to somebody else, considering I can't help but compare them. Maybe playing this as a kid who's massively into the show, just being in the world with the characters would be enough. And that's absolutely fine. I feel that way about certain games too. But I really don't think it has anything to offer anyone 20 years later. So why don't we just see what they did to improve on the formula only 1 year later with Shadow Showdown? Obviously we can skip over most of the introduction here because the game itself is very similar in setup to Breakin' the Rules, but the execution is where we're really going to see the main differences. So instead of wasting any time, let's just jump straight in. and we're actually introduced to a familiar logo pop up whilst loading the game.
And yeah, I know at first you might be a little apprehensive, not because it means Blitz will make a bad game,
but it's easy to worry that we're going to see the same game with a slightly different story and a fresher coat of paint over everything. But considering they had under a year to churn out another wacky adventure following the 10-year-old Timmy Turner and his magical comrades, it seems like they really took what they did with the first game, learned from its downfalls, and implemented improvements in both the actual gameplay as well as some quality of life improvements too, shaping it all into what was honestly a really enjoyable few hours. So in terms of story, we still get a very simple plot, but to me at least, one that makes a lot more sense to play through. Well, outside of us needing to collect ingredients to bake a magic muffin, which apparently is the only way to restore the fairy's magic. But it's still a massive improvement over what we had previously. In short, Timmy is ready to watch the finale of the Crash Nebula show, but just before it starts, the TV mysteriously breaks. Quickly wishing for a fix, it's revealed that once again the fairy's wands aren't working, causing Wanda to break out her emergency wand to rectify things. This transitioning us to the game's opening tutorial. I just want to interject here to mention how much they managed to improve the audio mix during cutscenes. I didn't mention it during Breaking the Rules, but every cutscene was an absolute chore to get through thanks to the terrible audio.
Mom and Dad are away this weekend. That means something important.
But when I say they improved on basically everything for the follow-up, I wasn't lying. Back into the tutorial, and we quickly run through the basics by jumping, double jumping, and sprinting around the area before the game again introduces us to the Witch Star mechanic. Fortunately for us, they've now made this exactly what it should have been to begin with, only needing us to collect 3 stars instead of the tedious 5, with each wish now granting us a brand new and unique ability to use in each level. So we'll get 3 wishes, and each of those wishes will give us a different ability that will stay with us throughout that specific level that we got them in. Now, rather than the wishes being a crutch the devs used to introduce the next section of gameplay or level, they've become an integral part of them, and the game is just so much better for it. We'll be able to pick and choose what wish we want to use at any point in each of the levels, and even though each puzzle or problem can only be solved with a specific wish, at least the illusion of choice creates a much more engaging and rewarding gameplay loop. Our abilities will range anywhere from weapons and traversal options, to revealing hidden platforms and even the ability to flip an entire level upside down at will. I was actually excited going into each level to find out what new way we'd be able to mess about and explore. Some of our abilities are limited to one scenario, like the monkey wrench being used to open specific doors or move platforms into place. But then we have abilities like this one turning Shadow Showdown into Super Monkey Ball. It's just a way better implementation of the wish mechanic than we had previously, and I'll say it one more time, it makes the game way more fun to play. Outside of that, we have a pretty straightforward formula, once again getting to jump into a mix of theme worlds, this time being different TV shows that we're making our way through. Like, we once again jump into the world of the Crimson Chin. Don't! Which, although isn't as visually striking as it was previously, is infinitely more fun to make our way through, with different platforming sections to test out our pogo stick and our amazing flying chin. We also get to explore an entire world of sentient monkeys, with the ability to turn into Lizard Boy and scurry our way up walls. These sections never getting too in-depth or difficult, but it was definitely a nice change of pace, and it's just another way to interact with our environment. I think my favourite had to be this haunted mansion though. It was just super cool to explore this huge, creepy, ghost-infested house, making it all the more fun when we get the ability to turn the entire level upside down whenever we want, opening up new paths to explore and puzzles to solve. The only downside to exploring each of the levels is that there's not really a whole lot of reason to. The only collectibles we get come in the form of stickers, these just being pictures of the different characters and enemies we encounter. And unless you're really into seeing still images of them, there's no actual reason to bother going for these whatsoever. We can still collect crowns though, which now act as a currency to purchase a few different upgrades from the game's shop. These can give us a larger damage radius for our bum bash, a longer length of time in which we can sprint, or even radars to detect the wish stars or different secrets hidden within the levels.
Truthfully, you really don't need them. There's nothing you're going to struggle with by going from the start of the game to the end without grabbing any of them.
But they're a welcome addition, and it's nice to at least have a reason to bother picking up crowns as you make your way through the levels. So all in all, it's obvious that we've seen some great improvements so far. The levels are larger and way more fun to make our way through, with different ways to traverse them. The wishes are fun to use and always unique, along with stuff like the audio levels making the cutscenes actually watchable. But another colossal improvement they've made that I've yet to mention is the boss fights. I can't stress enough how much better they've made them. So in the first level, we start off exploring Fairy World, a really cool environment to open the game with, introducing us to some pretty unique abilities too. We get this cow suit that we can use to make actual cows follow us, leading them to different switches to activate bridges, as well as a device that will shoot out whatever suit of cards we've collected from fountains dotted around the level. We need to collect the correct suit to shoot at these card barriers, opening access to different areas. It's great visually and just a fun level in general, with a good mix of puzzle solving, platforming, and light combat. We then move on to the boss of this area, who comes to us in the form of Quince, a maniacal jester who will constantly throw out evil gnomes that you'll either need to avoid or fight, whilst also collecting whatever suit of cards corresponds to the correct suit displayed on the meter on screen. Shooting him with that suit will cause damage, needing us to do this a total of 4 times, once for each suit. There's just so much more going on than what we had in Breaking the Rules. And don't get me wrong, it's still an incredibly simple and easy fight, but compared to the 70 seconds of standing in place behind a box, it makes Quince look like the fucking bed of chaos. And the boss fights just get better from here. In the next level, after making our way through the world of the well-chinned out superhero, we take on H2 Olga, with each stage of this fight being a slightly more challenging platforming section. Like I said, none of the fights were difficult or complicated, but I don't expect them to be. I'm well aware that we're playing a simple 3D platformer based on a popular kids show, but at the very least they were all engaging, all varied with different gameplay styles and abilities to enjoy, and a fun way to end each of the levels before moving on. So jumping to the end of the game, and here's your spoiler warning in case you were planning on checking this one out for yourself. It turns out in a dramatic twist ending that the source of our TV troubles is actually this sweet old Chamberlain. He had magically separated himself from his shadow in the hopes that he could more effectively serve his lord and lady. But unfortunately for him, apparently all shadows are pure evil. And would you look at that? The clue was in the name all along. The evil shadow wanted to use TV to create any show he wanted to make them into a reality in which he could rule. This leads us into a big boss fight before neatly tying the plot up, ending with Timmy finally getting to enjoy the Crash Nebula finale.
The plot's not winning any awards, but it's fun and goofy enough to give you a reason to keep playing, and fits in nicely with the same fun and goofiness you'd expect from the show. If you can't tell, I really did enjoy my time with this one.
Yeah, compared to the first game, it's an absolute 10 out of 10 game of the year. But even when we just take the game on its own, or when comparing it to similar offerings from the same period, it's a good time with some awesome environments, some really fun and unique abilities to mess around with, and surprisingly fun boss fights. If you're a fan of the show, or just a fan of 3D platformers in general,
then my advice would be skip over the first one altogether and just jump straight into the world of Shadow Showdown instead.
It wouldn't be right for me to make a video on Nickelodeon games without including one of the kings of the cartoon himself, SpongeBob Squarepants. I don't think there's too many people on the planet that don't recognise this porous protagonist, with the show finding massive success worldwide. Premiering in 1999, the first few seasons laid the foundation to build SpongeBob into the animated giant he still is, nearly 2.5 decades after his first introduction. With 13 seasons, 3 movies, over 40 games, countless collabs, a real-world fungus actually being named after him, and what is now an infinite supply of memes, it's hard to deny the cultural impact the show has had over the years, with millions of people still watching it to this day.
But with all that said, I'm not actually a massive fan of the show.
Not in terms of me not liking it, I just never watched it as much as I did some of Nickelodeon's other offerings. I honestly think I just missed the boat a little on it, and now I'm not fully up to date with the different plot lines, lore, and inside jokes the show may have. And whilst I did consider binge watching them all before making this video, I honestly don't think it's ever going to come out if I do. Besides, even if I'm not as into the show as what kids would have been at the time of these games releasing, it doesn't mean that I still can't enjoy them.
What I did want to do though is jump into a game that I haven't seen talked about quite as much.
I know countless people who love Battle for Bikini Bottom and grew up replaying it endlessly, but I think it's been talked about enough, especially considering the remake we got a few years ago. So instead, I took to Google to find one that may have flown under the radar a little, and what I found looked weird. But I can confirm, well yeah, it is fucking weird. Creature from the Krusty Krab released in 2006 and was once again handled by Blitz Games. But since this was 2 years after Showdown, I do have some high hopes. We're going to be greeted with a familiar formula of a 3D platformer with simple combat, along with a mixture of minigame sections thrown in to spice up the gameplay. In terms of setup, I'll be honest, it took me a little longer to figure out what was going on than it should have. And as a result, it made what is already a strange enough plot seem even stranger. Essentially, the game takes place within the dreams of the 3 different playable characters. SpongeBob, who's a race car driver, Patrick, who becomes a superhero, and Plankton, who dreams of turning himself into a giant city-destroying monster.
My issue was, I didn't actually catch on to the fact that this was all being based within the 3 characters' dreams.
Since at first there's no real link between them due to them being separate dreams, they were all met with a "what the fuck is even going on" from under my breath.
Yeah, it's a sad day to admit the plot of a game developed for 6-year-olds went over my head, but let's just jump into the first level anyway.
We start off playing as SpongeBob, who, like we said, dreams of being a race car driver, and a terrifying one at that. This opens the game with a driving level. We have very limited controls, literally being go, stop, left, and right. This does mean that the driving doesn't have the same satisfaction as a more fleshed out kart racer would. But they did a pretty good job at making the level itself chaotic enough to keep it engaging the first time through. It is incredibly simple, and I do always think it's weird when games open with a completely different gameplay style than what we would expect. But other than that, I don't have any issues with the level itself.
The issue I do have, which in all honesty is my biggest issue with the game in general,
is the fact that a lot of these levels and the mechanics in them are just repeated way too much. It feels like every level goes on a lot longer than it should, because rather than playing a level that has 1 or 2 sections of the same gameplay, they'll have you repeating the same thing 3, 4, or even 5 times in a row before moving on. I completely understand that a lot of this comes from Nickelodeon's tactics for its games releasing at the time, where they would only release their games during the holiday period. So I can imagine this meant developers had strict deadlines to bang out the next interactive adventure, and as a result, it makes a lot of games from this period feel like an abundance of copy and paste. For example, the first level has you completing 3 full races. Then after that, we get constant waves of enemies spawning during platforming levels, and mini-games being repeated 3 times too. It just means that the new and exciting gameplay style that you can't wait to test out very quickly feels like a boring slog that you can't wait to finally finish.
I completely understand that I've jumped ahead here, but like I said, it's my only real issue with the game, so I just thought I'd get it out of the way.
After we finish the race, we get to test out some platforming. And even though we see elements of that copy and paste come into effect, I did actually really enjoy these sections for the most part. It is all very straightforward, with us having access to a double jump, a bum bash, a single standard attack, plus a charge attack that will stun shielded enemies, opening them up for a hit. We can also interact with levers and switches to open doors and paths, and swing across sections wherever these specific anchors are placed. But all in all, the platforming sections were all snappy and smooth, and I enjoyed just making my way through each of the levels. The point of these sections in this level is to collect different car parts, upgrading our car to make it even faster to eventually win the big race. After doing this, we're going to check in with Patrick, and his dreams are about as weird as you would expect, with every character in these levels being the star himself. Apparently, I must just really like what Blitz do with comic book style levels, because the aesthetics were my favourite part about these ones. The level itself is fun enough, but puts a much larger focus on combat, seeing us spin and belly bash our way through waves and waves and waves of different enemies. We have the same moveset as SpongeBob, which means we are pretty limited to frantically smashing the square button to bulldoze our way through fights, which, as mentioned, just becomes more tedious the longer they go on. Another thing that really drives home that tedium is the fact that there's a lot going on screen at once. You get swarmed by enemies pretty often, with a lot of different animations and comic-style visual effects basically blinding you to what is actually going on. And because of this, you're very aware that you're just button bashing without any real plan or purpose. It's probably just enough of a sensory overload to keep the kids engaged, but it just makes these sections feel pretty hollow at their core. After a little too long with the crime fighting superstar, we wrap this one up and check in with Plankton. During an evil plan to grow 100 times in size to finally take over the town, Plankton's plan is foiled when he accidentally grows a burger that will chase us endlessly. And endless really is the takeaway here. These sections take a 2D perspective where we run away from the pursuing party, jumping gaps, hitting switches, and
taking out a few jellyfish along the way.
But again, these levels just massively overstay their welcome. It's nice that there's a different gameplay style to try out, but there's nothing interesting enough here to justify the minutes upon minutes of running to the right, turning what could have been a nice little change of pace into what feels like an endless runner. The only other main gameplay style we get is either piloting a rocket as Patrick or a plane as SpongeBob. And I know you know what I'm going to say, but even these sections just drag on way too long, quickly dissolving any of the fun that we could have had with them.
I think Creature from the Krusty Krab had some great ideas that could have resulted in a really fun playthrough.
But everything is just a little simple and a lot of repetitive, meaning it just misses the mark in a few ways. I love the idea of exploring each of the characters' dreams, creating some unique levels with no real limitations. And as simple as the platforming and combat is, they're solid enough to give the game a strong foundation. But ultimately, a lot of it just ends up overstaying its welcome. Whether it be constant combat encounters, levels dragging on, or pretty boring minigames being rinsed and repeated a little too much for my liking.
The weird thing is, I don't think it's a bad game. There were moments of enjoyment for me throughout.
And I know that the different gameplay styles and the characters themselves would have been enough fun for at least a weekend or two of some underwater action as a kid. But I just can't think of a good reason to recommend anyone playing this one anymore, which is a real shame. So instead, why don't we do something a little different, leave the past where it is for a second, and check out what SpongeBob can offer us today. That's right, we're jumping ahead nearly 2 decades to check out the Cosmic Shake, a brand new SpongeBob adventure releasing in January of this year, with a next-gen upgrade becoming available for free in October, and that's the version we're going to be playing today. The game was handled by Purple Lamp, who you may recognise as being responsible for the Battle for Bikini Bottom remake we got a few years back, with it all being published by THQ Nordic.
And it's nice to know that even in 2023, if there's a Nickelodeon platformer releasing, you still won't have to look too hard for that legendary logo.
The game's going to open with us visiting the Glove World amusement park, crossing paths with Madame Cassandra, a fortune-telling mermaid who sells us a magical bottle of bubble soap with the ability to grant us wishes. As expected, SpongeBob goes batshit crazy with it, granting the wishes of all the residents of Bikini Bottom. Only after this does Patrick read the label, which reveals that it's in fact property of King Neptune, and not to be used by either mortals or in large amounts. These magical bubbles go on to cause complete carnage by ripping holes in time and space, creating portals that suck up SpongeBob's friends into different wish worlds. These portals and wish worlds providing us with the different themed levels that we'll get to explore on our way to collecting all the cosmic jelly, repairing the damage done and saving our friends.
Outside of the initial setup, I'm going to try my best to avoid touching on any more of the story elements, as I know it's a newer game that some of you may not have played yet.
In all fairness, the bulk of the game and my opinions on it come in the form of the actual gameplay anyway, so I won't spoil any of the story going forward. Just keep in mind that there will be discussions about and footage of all the levels and abilities, as well as the different characters and themes that pop up. So if you're hoping to go into this one as blind as possible, now's your chance. And I really do recommend playing through it yourself if you're a fan of this genre. It really is a good time. If you're sticking with me, we'll just get back to it. So I first want to touch on the thing that most people are going to take in when booting it up, and that's the visuals. And to put it simply, I think they're beautiful. Nothing groundbreaking, of course, and we're not going to be spoilt with intense detail crammed into every pixel, but they've absolutely nailed that distinct cartoony style that we're all accustomed to with these types of games, whilst also refining everything a little to elevate it all to the modern day. Everything is super saturated with some beautiful colour palettes that make a lot of the different environments pop and really brings everything to life wonderfully. The first few worlds are more similar to each other, and as a result, you don't get that same impact when seeing them for the first time, I still think they look great, but everything maintains that underwater style with other elements mixed in to tie into whatever theme you're exploring at that time.
Hello, how are you? I am under the water.
But then eventually we jump into the Halloween town with pops of purples and pinks contrasted against the toxic green slime coating the level, or the deep orange lava pits contrasted by the luscious forestry of the prehistoric world. Everything is super fun and colourful, with the really over-the-top animations we've come to expect out of the sponge, and some really beautiful environments to explore. At a few points during my playthrough, I just stopped at the top of a mountain or a rooftop just to take everything in for a few seconds. It actually reminds me a lot of Crash 4 in terms of that over-the-top cartoony style, and both gave me that feeling of somebody showing you your childhood in 4K for the first time. Or, you know when your favourite cartoon released its first film, and everything just looked super clear? It felt like that. The cutscenes are also going to give us the same awesome animations, with some really great voice acting to tie everything together nicely. I especially love the choice to turn Patrick into a balloon for the entire game, because the little guy is adorable. But more importantly than what it looks like, how does it actually feel to play? Well, it's honestly just as good. You know what to expect at this point, a 3D platformer with simple combat, an array of different abilities to try out as you progress, plus a few different gameplay styles thrown in to keep it engaging.
Honestly, you could bang the description of the Cosmic Shake on the back cover of a game from 20 years ago and it would all still make perfect sense.
But as dated as the formula itself is, the game actually doesn't feel so at all. We're going to get the expected moveset to begin with access to a double jump, a ground pound, a simple melee attack, a dodge roll, and a glide. We can also throw bubbles with our net, which can be used as a stun attack on enemies, as well as a way to activate switches and different floating platforms. Whilst more restrictive in the first few hours, the platforming still feels great in general. SpongeBob doesn't have a particularly fast movement speed, and you're not going to be chaining together side flips into wall jumps into dives to race your way through platforming sections. But what we have is solid, responsive, and I always felt like I was in complete control of where I was going to land. Where this is all going to go up a level is when they start expanding our base moveset. Each new world will usually come with a new ability, and that's when stuff really starts getting good. With additions like a rope swing and a karate kick joining our arsenal, we'll soon be chaining together way longer platforming routes and using everything at our disposal to zip our way through the different environments. And these sections were by far my favourite. In general, the gameplay does seem to be aimed at a slightly younger audience, but it really doesn't make it any less fun because of that. Alongside the platforming, we will have sections of combat. This could just be random enemies dotted around the stages, but will also come in the form of these temporary combat areas that you'll need to complete before moving on. The combat does feel a little more restrictive than the platforming, but each of the worlds will introduce a new variation of the enemies that will have to be approached in a slightly different way. We'll fight basic one-hit enemies alongside big 3-hit enemies that we'll need to dodge before getting a hit in, along with these fast little fuckers that we'll need to stun with a karate kick before finishing off, or these things on a unicycle needing us to parry their bomb balls back at them. It really does keep the combat engaging, and it's nice to implement some sort of method to the madness instead of mindlessly button bashing. Like I said, it doesn't click with me as much as the platforming, but I never felt annoyed or bored with the combat, which is saying a lot for this type of game. Another thing I really think they've managed to pull off well here is the boss fights, with each of the bosses being an alternate timeline version of some familiar faces. And whilst some were a little better than others, they all needed a slightly different approach to take on, with some being more reminiscent of a combat arena, and others incorporating more of a platforming challenge to finish.
So platforming, combat and boss fights make up the bulk of the gameplay styles that we're introduced to.
But they all tied together beautifully, and I never felt like anything was being dragged out or repeated too much. They balanced everything out perfectly, and while some of the levels are large, they always felt purposeful. But more importantly, they were all just super fun to play through. You're going to have your main goal in each world, which is rescuing whatever character is trapped there. But they also give us actual reasons to explore too. These could be timed platforming challenges or combat encounters to earn doubloons. These act in as both a collectible, but also this game's leveling system. So since the abilities we get are earned naturally through progression, the doubloons are used to unlock different tiers of costumes, using the jelly we collect to actually purchase them. You can equip these at any point from the pause menu, and again, I'm sure a lot of these are references that I don't get, but still, there's a lot of really fun ones to unlock, and they give you a good reason to go out of your way to explore as much as you can. We're also given small side quests from some of the residents that will need us to jump back into each of the worlds to collect a set number of whatever they've asked for. They're just a nice excuse to go through each of the levels again at a slightly slower pace, really taking everything in. Another simple thing they've implemented that goes a long way is the ability to jump into not only whatever world you want at any point, but also pick a specific checkpoint from that world at any time too. You may have to backtrack to earlier levels with a new ability to access areas you couldn't before. But due to the levels being pretty large, this could have become a bit of a faff. But with the fast travel system, it's all just super simple to get to wherever you need to go. Yeah, it's a little thing, but really does go a long way. The only other thing I wanted to touch on was the other gameplay styles we test out throughout. And I know during this video that sometimes it seems like I'm not the biggest fan of them switching up the formula, but I'm really glad they included them here. We can ride on the back of seahorses, breaking boxes and avoiding hazards, or speed through these downhill sections on our tongue that I may have thought was a ball bag for the first 3 minutes or so, with us chaining together rope swings and karate kicks to avoid falling, with even a few whack-a-mole and Simon Says sections thrown in for good measure. They all just give me this massive whack of nostalgia, and although we do have a few sections of posing for paparazzi or winding socks up a flagpole that just require us to stand in place and smack a single button, for the most part, they were all just another fun little piece that was part of a much larger but equally fun puzzle.
I played through most of this one with a stupid grin smacked on my face because it gave me a familiar feeling of exploring these weird and wonderful worlds I did as a kid.
And I'm just so glad that we still have games that are not only keeping that feeling alive for those of us that may not have experienced it in a while, but also introducing a brand new generation of kids to it. Like I said, the game's description would have been right at home next to the classics we remember from 20 years ago, and it doesn't do anything too new or too different from any of them. And whilst it doesn't try to push the boat out, I'm really glad it doesn't.
My only hope is that both the devs and people buying video games remember that there's enough space for this type of game next to the gritty realism, the massive PvPs, and the huge 160-hour investments that first overshadowed them.
If you made it to this point in the video, I'm pretty sure you're a fan of these types of games, and you absolutely have my recommendation to check this one out for yourself, for what is a simple and familiar formula, but incredibly fun. And that's all we can really ask for after all. And there we have it, a nostalgic dive back into the world of Nickelodeon games, and what a dive it was. Do I have some issues with some of the games we played today? Absolutely. But honestly, that's okay. It's always easy to think back on these games and remember them as being a little better than maybe they are when going back through them nowadays. It's hard not to see a slight hue of the rose-coloured glasses reflecting off certain parts of them. But that's the thing about nostalgia. We don't look at things through the technical, judgy lens we tend to use on more modern releases, because we're not judging them entirely on what they offer for us now, but rather what they offered for us when they released. A new way to spend time with characters you loved and related to, and another way to explore places you had grown so familiar with. The memories and the adventures we shared with these characters will always hold a special place in our heart, and the games are just a nice way to experience an extension of them.
I'm also fully aware that I missed out on some of Nickelodeon's best offerings.
There was no Jimmy Neutron or even Avatar.
So I think I might just have to jump back in for a part 2 soon.
If you remember any games you loved as a kid, or maybe a few that you don't see talked about enough and want me to check them out, just let me know down in the comments.
But for now, I really hope it was as much fun for you to go back through these games as it was for me. And if so, don't forget to subscribe just to stay up to date with content from me in the future. And as always, I really hope to see each and every one of you in the next video.